The morning sun broke gently over the quiet harbor, painting the water with streaks of gold. John Miller stood on the dock, hands on his hips, breathing in the salty air. This was his favorite time of day, early, when the world was still half asleep and the ocean looked like glass. For weeks, he had been planning this weekend, marking it on his calendar in red ink as though it were a holiday. Today wasn't just any day. Today, he was taking his daughter, Lily, on her first proper sailing trip, just the two of them. He turned back toward the parking lot and saw Lily coming down the path, her small backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She was grinning ear to ear, wearing the bright yellow life jacket he had bought her last month. "Ready, Captain?" he called, his voice warm. "Yes," she shouted, running to him. She was 10 years old, with wide brown eyes and an energy that seemed to light up the air around her. He knelt to help her with the straps, double-checking everything the way he always did. Safety first. That was John's rule. He had been sailing since he was a teenager, and he knew the ocean could turn from friend to enemy in a heartbeat. But today, the weather was perfect. Clear skies, gentle wind, calm seas. Sandwiches, check. Juice boxes, check. Life jackets, check, he said, going through their list. Lily laughed. "And snacks for Daisy," she added, holding up the small stuffed dolphin she took everywhere. He smiled. "Of course, can't forget Daisy." Sarah, his wife, appeared then, walking toward them with a thermos in hand. She handed it to John. "Coffee. You'll need it after last night," she teased. Last night had been a blur of excitement. Lily refusing to go to bed, insisting on packing and unpacking her bag 3 times to make sure she had everything. Sarah had finally coaxed her to sleep with the promise that they'd wave goodbye at sunrise. "You sure you don't want to come?" John asked, though he knew the answer. Sarah shook her head, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You two need this. It's been a tough year." Her eyes softened as they met his. They both knew what she meant. John had been working long hours at the construction firm, and Lily had been struggling with school after their recent move. This trip was meant to be a reset button, a chance for father and daughter to reconnect. John reached for her hand. "We'll be back Sunday night, maybe with some fish for dinner." "You'd better," Sarah said with a smile, though her chest felt tight. She had a strange habit of worrying whenever John went sailing. She trusted him. He was careful, experienced, but the sea was unpredictable. They all walked together to the small sailboat. See Whisper, its white hull gleaming in the early light. John climbed aboard first, then lifted Lily over the side as if she weighed nothing at all. He stowed their gear neatly, everything in its place, then checked the sails and rigging one last time. "All right, first mate," he said, handing Lily the tiller. "Hold her steady while I cast off." Sarah stood on the dock, arms wrapped around herself as she watched them work together. She felt a swell of pride. Lily looked so happy, so confident. The boat eased away from the dock, the water rippling behind it. John raised the sails, and the wind caught them with a soft snap. The boat tilted slightly, then glided forward, cutting to the harbor like a knife through silk. Sarah waved both hands. "See you Sunday," she called. "See you Sunday." Lily yelled back, her voice carrying across the water. John looked over his shoulder and gave Sarah a reassuring nod. Then he turned his eyes forward, focusing on the open sea ahead. The horizon stretched endlessly, as though inviting them to adventure. The morning passed in laughter. John taught Lily how to tie simple knots, letting her practice until her fingers ached. They sailed past the breakwater and into deeper water, where the waves grew taller but still gentle. Lily leaned over the side, watching schools of silver fish dart below. "This is amazing, Dad," she said, beaming. He ruffled her hair. "Just wait until tonight. We'll anchor near the cove, roast marshmallows, and you can see the stars better than anywhere on land." "Will we see dolphins?" "Maybe, if we're lucky." They spent hours out on the water, the boat rocking them like a lullaby. They had lunch on deck, peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, while John told her stories about his own childhood sailing trips with his father. As the afternoon sun began to dip, they sailed to a quiet island where John had anchored before. He dropped anchor and helped Lily set up their small tent on the sandy shore. She collected seashells while he started a small fire for dinner. That night, they sat side by side under a sky full of stars, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. Lily curled up next to him, Daisy the stuffed dolphin tucked under her arm. "I wish every weekend could be like this," she murmured sleepily. "Me too, kiddo," John said softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It was a perfect day, the perfect night. A memory Sarah would later replay 1,000 times, never knowing that it was the last one they would ever share together. When the wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves, John glanced out at the dark ocean. The waves looked calm, but a strange chill ran down his spine. He shook it off and focused on his sleeping daughter. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow we'll sail home. He had no way of knowing that tomorrow would never come. The next morning, Sarah woke with a strange heaviness in her chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. Normally, Lily's chatter would echo through the kitchen as soon as she opened her eyes, but today there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. She shook the feeling off. John and Lily were probably out on the water already, enjoying breakfast on the boat. She brewed herself coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. By noon, she was pacing. John usually called or texted when they reached the island. He had promised to check in. Just a signal issue, she told herself. Sometimes the reception out there was spotty. By evening, her phone was still silent. Sarah stared at it on the counter, as though she could will it to ring. She even called John's phone twice, but each time it went straight to voicemail. Her hands trembled slightly as she left a message. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in. Call me when you get this, okay?" She forced herself to cook dinner, but the food sat untouched. By the time night fell, she was sitting by the window, staring into the darkness, phone clutched in her lap. Her mind played cruel games. Images of their boat breaking down, of them stranded somewhere, of Lily crying. When the sun rose the next morning and still there was no word, panic bloomed in her chest like fire. Sarah called the harbor master. "My husband hasn't come back. They were supposed to return last night," she said, her voice tight. Within an hour, she was sitting in a small office, clutching a photo of John and Lily while the harbor master called the Coast Guard. He kept his voice calm, professional, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said gently, "we're going to launch a search and rescue operation. Try to stay calm." Stay calm? The words barely registered. Her heart was thudding so hard she felt dizzy. Soon, the quiet harbor transformed into a hive of activity. Rescue boats roared to life, their engines thundering. Helicopters appeared overhead, blades chopping through the air. Volunteers gathered with binoculars, scanning the sea. Sarah stood on the dock, gripping the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Her eyes searched the horizon over and over, desperate for a glimpse of white sails, of her little girl waving. Hours passed. The first helicopter returned with nothing to report. The boats radioed in, no sign of the sea whisper. The sun dipped lower, turning the water blood red. Sarah's knees buckled, and one of the search coordinators guided her to a chair. Someone handed her water, but she couldn't drink. By the second day, the search widened. They sent divers into nearby coves, searched every inlet, every sandbar. The Coast Guard found an empty cooler drifting miles away, one she recognized as theirs. Later, they found a life jacket bobbing on the surface. It was too small for John. Sarah's breath caught. "Is it?" "No," the officer said quickly. "It's not a child size. It could have come loose in the storm." Storm. That word chilled her blood. She hadn't even realized there had been one. The Coast Guard explained that a sudden squall had passed through the area late Sunday night. High winds, dangerous waves. Small boats can get into trouble fast in those conditions, one of them said quietly. Sarah's mind flashed to Lily, small, frightened, clinging to her father as waves crashed over them. The thought made her sob into her hands until her whole body shook. On the third day, she stopped sleeping. She barely ate. She waited on the dock from sunrise to sunset, listening to the radios, watching every returning boat. Neighbors came to sit with her, bringing sandwiches, coffee, blankets, but nothing helped. She barely noticed when the search crews returned each evening with empty faces. By the end of the first week, the Coast Guard's tone had changed. It was subtle at first. Fewer updates, more quiet conversations away from her. Finally, the lead officer sat down next to her. "Mrs. Miller," he said softly, "we've covered more than 300 square miles." At this point, he hesitated, his eyes full of pity. At this point, the likelihood of survival is very small. "No," Sarah said immediately, shaking her head. "No. My husband is a strong swimmer. He's careful. He wouldn't just disappear. And Lily, she's only 10. You can't stop looking. You can't." He sighed heavily. "We'll continue for another 48 hours. Those 2 days stretched like years. She barely noticed when the search officially ended, when the boats and helicopters stopped coming. The harbor went back to being quiet, as if nothing had happened. But Sarah's world had been shattered. An official report arrived in the mail a week later. Lost at sea. Presumed dead. Sarah threw the paper across the room. How could they write those words? How could they presume anything when there were no bodies, no wreckage, no answers? She stood in Lily's room that night, running her hand over the neatly made bed, the shelf of stuffed animals, the row of books waiting to be read. She sat down and wept until she couldn't breathe. Friends and neighbors held a memorial service, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to go. "There's nothing to mourn," she said stubbornly. "They're not gone. They're just not here." Every night, she left the porch light on, as though it might guide them home. Every morning, she checked the news, hoping for a miracle. A report of a boat found drifting, a survivor rescued, a little girl discovered on some distant shore. But the ocean stayed silent. And silence, Sarah realized, was the cruelest sound of all. The weeks after the Coast Guard called off the search were the hardest of Sarah's life. She moved through the house like a shadow, opening and closing drawers, straightening Lily's bedspread, putting away dishes she didn't remember using. Sometimes she caught herself setting 3 plates at the dinner table before stopping cold, her hands trembling. The world outside kept turning. Neighbors mowing their lawns, kids riding bikes down the street, the postman delivering bills. But for Sarah, time had stopped. In the first month, she refused to pack away anything. Lily's backpack sat by the door where she had left it. John's shoes remained by the bed. Sarah washed and folded their clothes, as if they might walk to the door any minute and need them. Friends stopped by with casseroles and sympathetic smiles. Some were kind enough to just sit with her in silence. Others tried to tell her what she should feel. "You need closure, Sarah." One neighbor said gently, "You can't go on like this." But Sarah wasn't ready to close anything. "They're out there," she insisted. "Somewhere." She threw herself into action, as if sheer determination could pull John and Lily back from the ocean. She printed missing person flyers with their photos and mailed them to marinas up and down the coast. She called local news stations, asking them to run a segment about the disappearance. She wrote letter after letter to the Coast Guard, urging them to reopen the search. When months passed without answers, Sarah turned to private investigators. She spent money she didn't have on consultations with maritime experts, storm analysts, psychics, anyone who might give her a new theory, a fresh lead. Her efforts became an obsession. The living room filled with maps of the coastline, pinned with colored tacks marking possible currents and drift patterns. She kept a journal where she logged every dream, every gut feeling, every sign she thought she saw. Some nights she would drive to the harbor, sit in her car, and stare at the water until sunrise. The sound of the waves both comforted and tortured her. It was the last sound John and Lily had heard. Years began to slip by. Seasons changed, and Sarah marked them not by holidays but by anniversaries. 1 year since the disappearance, 2, 3. Each time, she lit a candle by the window and whispered their names. By the 5th year, people had stopped asking questions. The neighbors no longer brought food. Friends stopped calling. Even family members gently urged her to start living again. "You can't keep waiting forever," her sister told her one Thanksgiving. Sarah pushed her plate away. "If it were your child, would you stop?" she said flatly. Eventually, she stopped attending holidays altogether. It was easier to be alone than to sit at a table with empty chairs. But even as the years wore her down, she refused to let go completely. Lily's room became a shrine. Every birthday, Sarah placed a new gift on the bed, still wrapped. She kept a growth chart on the wall, adding pencil marks each year, imagining how tall her daughter will be by now. At night, she dreamed of them. Sometimes the dreams were cruel. John and Lily calling to her from the deck of a sinking boat, their hands outstretched. Other times they were sweet, Lily running into her arms, John smiling that quiet, steady smile of his. Those dreams kept her alive. Around the 8th year, Sarah joined a support group for families of the missing. She sat in a circle with other parents, siblings, spouses who knew the strange, heavy ache of ambiguous loss. Together, they shared stories and rituals for remembering. It's okay to hope and grieve at the same time, one counselor told her. Sarah held on to that phrase. Hope and grief, two sides of the same coin. As the 12th year approached, Sarah felt a subtle shift inside herself. She was no longer the frantic woman who stayed up all night making phone calls, but she also wasn't ready to close the door. She had learned to live with the ache, like a scar that never fully healed. She took a part-time job at the local library, grateful for the quiet. She started gardening, finding a strange comfort in growing things, flowers, vegetables, anything that gave her proof life could come from soil that seemed barren. But every night before bed, she still left the porch light on. One stormy afternoon, as thunder rolled over the bay, Sarah sat by the window watching the rain streak the glass. She traced the droplets with her finger, lost in thought. 12 years. Would Lily even remember her face anymore? Would she know the sound of her mother's voice? The thought twisted Sarah's heart. Just then, a knock came at the door, sharp, unexpected, cutting through the storm. Sarah froze. She rarely had visitors anymore, and no one knocked like that. Her heart pounded as she crossed the room and opened the door. On the porch stood a man she had never seen before, tall, weathered, his clothes soaked from the rain. There was something about his eyes, though. They carried a weight she recognized instantly. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady. Sarah nodded, gripping the doorframe. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a salt-stained envelope, the edges worn from years of travel. "I think it's time you knew the truth," he said. The man stood on the porch, rain dripping from his hair, his boots leaving small puddles on the welcome mat. Sarah's first instinct was fear, not of him, but of what he might be bringing. For 12 years, every knock on the door had been a potential answer. Most were ordinary, neighbors, delivery men, salespeople, and she would close the door, heart sinking back into familiar emptiness. But this was different. The man's face was weathered, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes, they were kind and yet unbearably heavy, as though he carried the weight of a story too long unsaid. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked again. Sarah swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry, her heart thudding painfully. "Yes. Can I help you?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder at the rain-soaked street, then held out the envelope. It was creased and stained, as if it had traveled far, as if it had been handled again and again. "I think this belongs to you." Sarah took it with trembling hands. The paper was damp, soft at the edges. Slowly, she turned it over. There was no name on the front, just a single word written in familiar handwriting. Sarah. Her breath caught. Her knees nearly gave out as she sank onto the nearest chair in the entryway, staring at the letter. That handwriting. She would know it anywhere. John's strong, slightly slanted script. Her fingers shook as she tore the envelope open. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded carefully, as though whoever had written it had taken great care not to let it get ruined. She opened it. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong on the boat. We're alive, for now, but stranded. I'm doing everything I can to keep Lily safe. If I don't make it, tell her I love her. Tell her I never stopped trying to bring her home. John." Sarah pressed the paper to her chest, a sob ripping through her. For 12 years she had begged for a sign, any sign that they had survived, and here it was in her hands. When she finally looked up, the man was still standing there, quiet, patient. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Daniel," he said. I was the one who found them." Sarah blinked at him, her mind spinning. "Found them? Found who?" "Your husband. Your daughter," Daniel said gently. The room tilted for a moment, and Sarah had to grip the arm of the chair. Her breath came fast and shallow. "You found them?" Daniel nodded, stepping inside as she gestured him out of the rain. He stood awkwardly, dripping on the rug, but his voice was calm, steady, like a man used to delivering bad news. "It was 12 years ago," he said. "I was fishing off a remote part of the coast when I saw smoke. Thought maybe a boat had run aground. When I went ashore, I found your husband and your little girl. They had been there for weeks by then, maybe longer." Sarah clutched the letter tighter. "Alive," she whispered, as if saying it aloud might make it more real. "Yes," Daniel said softly. "Alive, but not well. They'd built a shelter from driftwood, but food was scarce. Your husband was already sick when I arrived. Fever, dehydration. He gave me that letter and made me promise to deliver it if anything happened to him." Sarah's chest ached as though her ribs were closing in. "Anything happened?" Daniel's face clouded with grief. "I stayed with them for a few days, brought them what little I had from my boat. But Johnny got worse. He made me promise, no matter what, to take Lily somewhere safe." Sarah's tears spilled over, hot and unstoppable. "So you took her?" "Yes," Daniel said, nodding. "I took her to a small village. I didn't know how to contact you, and I was afraid she wouldn't survive if I tried to take her back by boat in the storm season. So I stayed, raised her as my own until she was strong enough to take care of herself." The words hit Sarah like a wave. Lily alive, grown, somewhere out there in the world. "Why now?" Sarah asked suddenly, her voice sharp, almost accusing. "Why come after all this time?" Daniel looked down at his hands. "Because she's asking questions now. She's grown, and she deserves to know where she came from. And you deserve to know she's alive." Sarah stood, pacing the living room, clutching the letter as though it were a lifeline. Her emotions warred inside her: gratitude, rage, hope, grief. "You kept her from me," she said, her voice trembling. "For 12 years. "I kept her alive," Daniel said simply. His tone wasn't offensive, just factual. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of rain on the roof. Finally, Sarah sank back into the chair. "Where is she?" Daniel pulled out a small, worn photograph from his pocket and placed it on the table. Sarah's breath caught again. The girl in the picture was about 18, standing barefoot on a beach, hair wild from the wind, smiling shyly at the camera. She had John's eyes. Sarah traced the image with her finger, as if she could reach through the photograph and touch her. "Lily," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "She goes by another name now. But yes, that's her." For a long moment, Sarah just stared at the picture, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked up, determination hardening her features. "Take me to her," she said. Daniel hesitated. "It's not an easy trip. The village is remote. And she doesn't know you. Not really." "I don't care," Sarah said fiercely, gripping the photograph like a weapon. "She's my daughter. I've waited 12 years for this moment. I will go anywhere. I will do anything." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you should be prepared. This won't be the reunion you've been imagining. She has a life now. She may not remember you." Sarah swallowed hard. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Then I'll help her remember." As Daniel left that night, promising to return in 2 days to take her on the journey, Sarah sat alone in the quiet house, the letter in one hand, the photograph in the other. For the first time in 12 years, the silence no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a pause before the next chapter, and Sarah was ready to turn the page. 2 days later, Sarah found herself sitting across from Daniel in a small diner near the harbor. The rain had cleared, leaving the world washed clean, but Sarah's heart was still storm-tossed. She gripped a mug of coffee, not tasting it, her eyes fixed on Daniel as he began to speak. When I first saw the smoke, he said slowly, I thought it was just some kids camping on the island. I was planning to move on, but something told me to check. When I reached the shore, I found a makeshift fire pit and 2 people, a man and a little girl, your husband and Lily. Sarah pictured it. John's broad shoulders stooped, his shirt torn, Lily's small face smudged with dirt, eyes wide and hollow. They were alive, Daniel continued, but just barely. The boat had capsized in the storm. John told me he'd managed to grab Lily in a single waterproof bag before the boat went under. Everything else was lost. They'd been surviving on rainwater. They caught in leaves and what little they could forage, crabs, coconuts, berries. He'd made a shelter from driftwood and sailcloth, but the nights were cold and the storm season was getting worse. Sarah's hand shook as she clutched the mug tighter. Was Lily hurt? She asked softly. No, Daniel said, shaking his head. She was thin, tired, scared, but unhurt. John was another story. Sarah braced herself. He had a deep gash on his leg, probably from when the boat went down. It had gotten infected. He was feverish, weak, barely able to stand some days. Still, he wouldn't let me touch the wound until I promised him something. Sarah blinked. Promise what? That I'd take care of Lily if he couldn't. A lump rose in Sarah's throat. She could picture John making that demand, stubborn even on death's door, refusing to let go until he knew his little girl would be safe. I stayed with him for 3 days, Daniel said, staring down at his hands as though he could still see them. I cleaned the wound, tried to get the fever down, but it was too late. The infection had spread too far. John knew it. On the 2nd night, he handed me that letter. He told me about you, about the house on Maple Street, about how much Lily loved peanut butter sandwiches and stargazing. Sarah's tears fell freely now, landing on the table. Did he? Her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. Did he suffer? Daniel shook his head gently. No, it was peaceful. He made me promise again, right before the end, that I'd take Lily somewhere safe. He made me swear I wouldn't leave her there alone to die. Sarah pressed her fist against her mouth, stifling a sob. She could picture John lying there, the sound of the ocean in the distance, his last thoughts of her and Lily. I buried him on the island, Daniel said quietly, under a big palm tree overlooking the sea. I marked the spot with stones so I could find it again. For a long moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She imagined that lonely grave, the waves lapping nearby, the man she had loved all her life resting there with no one to mourn him but a fisherman and a frightened child. And Lily, she whispered finally. Daniel's eyes softened. She didn't understand what was happening at first. She thought he was sleeping. I stayed with her until she was ready to leave. She didn't want to go at first. She said she wanted to wait for him to wake up, but I couldn't stay there forever. The storms were getting worse. We left at dawn one morning. He paused, his jaw tightening. It wasn't an easy trip. The boat I had wasn't meant for long travel, and she was terrified the whole time. She wouldn't speak for days. But eventually, we reached the mainland, a remote coastal village where no one asked too many questions. Sarah pictured it. Lily clinging to Daniel, silent, grieving, her childhood shattered. I didn't have a means to contact anyone, Daniel continued. And even if I did, I wasn't sure who to contact. John had told me your name, but I didn't know how to find you. I stayed. I raised her as my own. I taught her to fish, to swim, to cook. She grew strong. She smiled again. Sarah's heart ached. Part of her was grateful beyond words. But another part, the part that had waited by the window every night, burned with anger. You could have tried, she said bitterly. You could have found a way to send a message. You could have spared me 12 years of not knowing. Daniel nodded, accepting the anger without protest. You're right. I could have tried harder. I should have. But I was afraid. Afraid someone would take her from me before she was ready. Afraid she'd end up in a system somewhere, lost again. Maybe I was selfish. I couldn't break the promise I made to John. Sarah stared at him, her tears blurring her vision. She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. He had kept Lily alive. He had done what John asked, Does she know about me? Daniel hesitated. No, not everything. I told her father died at sea, but I didn't tell her about you. I thought it would hurt too much, and I didn't want to confuse her when she was so little. But now she's older. She's asking questions. She wants to know where she came from. Sarah's breath caught. Her heart felt both broken and mended at once. She has your smile, Daniel said quietly, and John's stubbornness. She's become quite a young woman. For a moment, Sarah let herself imagine it. Lily as a teenager, laughing, running on a beach, living a life she had never seen. I have to see her, Sarah said finally, her voice fierce and steady. Daniel nodded. Then you will. But you have to understand, this won't be easy. She doesn't remember her life before. To her, you're a stranger. Sarah gripped the letter again, feeling John's words like a heartbeat beneath her fingers. Then I'll remind her who I am, she whispered. I'll remind her of everything. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, sending a shaft of light through the diner window. It fell across Sarah's face, warming her skin. For 12 years, she had been trapped in a storm of grief. But now, finally, she saw the first glimmer of a way forward. The next morning, Sarah packed a small suitcase, not because she needed much, but because her hands needed something to do. Every shirt folded, every zipper closed felt like a step towards something she had been dreaming of for over a decade. The ferry terminal smelled of salt and diesel fuel. Seagulls wheeled overhead, calling out like messengers of fate. Sarah stood at the edge of the dock, letter in her hand, heart thudding so loudly she wondered if the other passengers could hear it. Daniel met her there, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His weathered face was unreadable, but there was a tension in his shoulders that matched her own. She's waiting, he said simply. Those two words sent a rush of electricity through Sarah's veins. Waiting. For her? For the truth? For an answer to a question she might not even know she was asking? The boat ride was long and slow, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Sarah sat on the deck, clutching the railing as the wind tangled her hair. She tried to imagine what Lily looked like now, 12 years older. Would she recognize her? Would Lily's eyes light up in recognition, or would they be blank, guarded, suspicious? Every wave that rocked the boat seemed to carry another memory. Lily at 5, twirling in a yellow dress. Lily giggling as John tossed her into the air. Lily's small hand reaching for hers during thunderstorms. By the time they neared the shore, Sarah's heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. The village came into view, a scatter of brightly painted huts near the water's edge, fishing boats pulled up on the sand, nets drying in the sun. It was a place that looked untouched by time, as if it existed outside the world Sarah had known. Children ran along the shoreline, laughing, their voices carrying across the water. Somewhere a dog barked. Smoke drifted from cooking fires. Daniel pointed toward a narrow path leading away from the beach. She's at the house. We'll walk from here. The path wound between palm trees and wildflowers, and with every step Sarah's stomach knotted tighter. She had rehearsed what she might say 1,000 times in her head. Lily, it's me. I'm your mother. But now the words felt fragile, almost impossible. Finally, they reached a small cottage with whitewashed walls and a tin roof that glinted in the sunlight. It was simple, humble, but there were flowers in the window and a hammock strung between 2 trees. She's inside, Daniel said quietly. Sarah's knees felt weak. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. She was about to see her daughter, her baby, after 12 years of imagining this very moment. Daniel stepped inside first. Lily, he called softly. There was a sound of footsteps, then a voice, light, musical, almost grown. What is it? And then she appeared. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Lily stood in the doorway, a young woman now, tall, sun-browned from years by the sea, her hair long and loose around her shoulders. But it was the eyes that undid Sarah, the same warm hazel eyes she had kissed goodnight 1,000 times, the same eyes that looked up at her on the first day of kindergarten. For a moment, time stopped. Lily looked at Sarah curiously, tilting her head. Who's this? Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. This is Sarah, Daniel said gently. She's someone I want you to meet. Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was afraid that if she spoke too soon, she might shatter the fragile stillness of the moment. Lily stepped closer, her brow furrowed. "Why are you crying?" she asked softly. Sarah hadn't even realized the tears were falling. She wiped them away with the back of her hand and tried to smile, but it trembled. "Because I've been waiting a very long time to see you," Sarah whispered. Lily blinked, confused. "To see me?" Daniel's hand rested gently on Lily's shoulder. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly. They sat together under the shade of the trees, the ocean murmuring in the distance. Daniel explained slowly, carefully, how John had been Lily's father, how he had passed away on the island, how Sarah had searched for her for years. At first, Lily said nothing. She stared at the ground, her hands twisting in her lap. Sarah reached out, but stopped just short of touching her. "You don't have to believe me right now," she said gently. "But everything Daniel told you is true. I am your mother. I've missed you every single day." Lily looked up at her then, her expression unreadable. "I don't remember you," she said finally. The words hit Sarah like a blow, but she nodded. "I know. You were so young when it happened. But I remember you. I remember the way you hated green peas and loved building blanket forts in the living room. I remember how you would only sleep if I sang you the same song every night." Lily's lips parted slightly, as if some distant memory had stirred. "You used to have a stuffed rabbit," Sarah continued, her voice trembling. "Its name was Button. You wouldn't go anywhere without it." Lily's eyes widened. "Button," she whispered. "Yes." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Button." Something in Lily's face softened then, the first crack in the wall between them. She looked at Daniel, as if for confirmation. He nodded. "That's all true," he said. Silence stretched between them for a moment before Lily spoke again. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, her voice quiet but heavy. Sarah's chest ached. "I didn't know where you were. I tried everything. The Coast Guard, private search teams, the police. No one could find you. I never stopped looking, not for one single day." Lily's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. She glanced at the sea, as if the horizon might hold the answer she needed. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted finally. "You don't have to decide right now," Sarah said softly. "I just wanted you to know the truth, and to know that I'm here if you ever want me to be." For a long time, Lily was quiet. Then, hesitantly, she stood up and stepped closer to Sarah. "Do you want to see where we used to sit at night?" she asked suddenly. "Daniel built a swing for me in the tree." Sarah's heart lifted, hope flooding her chest. "I'd love that." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reunion. Not yet, but it was a start. As Lily led her toward the tree swing, the sun dipped lower on the horizon, bathing everything in gold. For the first time in 12 years, Sarah felt that maybe, just maybe, her family could be whole again in some new, unexpected way. The next few days felt like walking on fragile glass. Sarah stayed in a small guest room near Daniel's cottage, waking each morning to the sound of roosters crowing, the ocean whispering beyond the dunes. Each sunrise filled her with hope, but also with fear that Lily might never let her in. On the first morning, Sarah found Lily outside, sitting barefoot on the wooden swing beneath the palm tree. The ropes creaked softly as she swayed, her long hair falling forward like a curtain. Sarah hesitated, then sat down on a nearby rock, keeping her distance. "Do you always wake up this early?" she asked gently. Lily shrugged without looking at her. "Daniel says it's the best time to go fishing." Sarah nodded. "Your father loved mornings, too. He'd wake me up before dawn, sometimes just to watch the sunrise with him. I used to complain that it was too early, but he'd say, 'This is when the world feels the most alive.'" For a moment, Lily was still. Then she glanced sideways at Sarah, curious despite herself. Was he really like that? Sarah's heart squeezed. Yes, he had the biggest laugh, the kind that filled the whole house. And he loved teaching you new things, how to ride a bike, how to whistle. He used to carry you on his shoulders everywhere we went. A small smile ghosted across Lily's lips. "I don't remember his face," she admitted softly. Sarah's throat tightened, but she forced a gentle smile. That's okay. If you want, I can show you pictures later. I brought a whole album with me. Lily nodded, but didn't say anything more. Still with something. A door cracked open, just a little. Over the next few days, Sarah made a conscious effort not to push too hard. She joined Daniel and Lily on their daily routines, mending nets, helping to gather coconuts, cooking simple meals over a fire. She was clumsy at first, but Lily found herself laughing when Sarah got tangled in a fishing net or shrieked at the sight of a crab skittering past her foot. That laughter was the sweetest sound Sarah had ever heard. At night, Sarah would sit outside under the stars while Lily climbed a tree swing and told Daniel about her day. Sarah didn't interrupt. She just listened, memorizing the sound of her daughter's voice, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way her whole face lit up when she talked about something she loved. One evening, Lily surprised her by sitting next to her on the porch steps. "What was I like when I was little?" she asked suddenly. Sarah smiled through the ache in her chest. "Oh, you were a whirlwind. Always moving, always asking questions. You'd get into everything. Once, you painted the dog blue because you thought he looked prettier that way." Lily giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Did he?" "He did," Sarah said with a grin. "At least until I had to give him 3 baths to get it off." They both laughed then, the sound mingling with the waves crashing in the distance. "Do you miss him?" Lily asked softly, after a pause. Sarah's breath caught. "Every day," she said honestly. "But seeing you, it feels like a piece of him is still here." Lily looked away quickly, blinking as if holding back tears. "Daniel says, I have his eyes," she murmured. "You do," Sarah said gently, "and his stubborn streak." This time, Lily smiled just a little. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Lily standing by her door, holding something in her hands. "I want to see the pictures," she said shyly. Sarah's heart leapt. She retrieved the photo album from her suitcase and sat cross-legged on the bed while Lily perched at the foot. They turned the pages slowly. Photos of birthday parties, picnics, beach days, and quiet moments at home. Lily leaned closer, tracing her finger over a picture of John lifting her high into the air. "He looked so happy," she whispered. "He was," Sarah said softly. "He loved you more than anything in the world." They went through the whole album, page by page, until Lily finally looked up. "I think I remember this dress," she said, pointing to a picture of herself in a frilly pink outfit. Sarah's face lit up. "Yes, you refused to take it off. You wore it for 3 days straight, even to bed." Lily laughed, and for a moment, the years between them seemed to vanish. But it wasn't all easy. There were days Lily withdrew, spending hours alone by the water. Sarah respected the space, though it hurt. She knew she couldn't rush this, couldn't demand forgiveness or love. One evening, she found Lily skipping stones on the shore, her expression troubled. "Do you wish Daniel hadn't raised me?" Lily asked suddenly, without looking at her. Sarah's chest ached. "No," she said firmly. "He saved your life. He gave you a home when I couldn't find you. I will always be grateful to him for that." Lily nodded slowly. "I don't want to hurt him. He's been everything to me." Sarah swallowed hard, her throat tight. "You don't have to choose, sweetheart. You can love him and still get to know me. Love isn't something that runs out." Lily's shoulders relaxed just slightly. "Will you stay for a while?" she asked after a long pause. Sarah's heart soared. "As long as you'll have me." The days that followed were filled with small, quiet moments of connection. Sarah taught Lily some of the games she used to play as a child. Lily showed Sarah how to mend a fishing net properly, laughing when Sarah got it wrong. They cooked together, went swimming together, and one night they sat on the sand under the stars, just as John had once done with Sarah. "Do you think he can see us?" Lily asked softly, gazing up at the night sky. Sarah smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "I think he can." And for the first time in 12 long years, Sarah felt that the gaping wound in her heart was beginning to heal. Not completely, but enough to breathe again. The days melted together like the golden sunsets that washed over the village each evening. For Sarah, every moment felt borrowed, precious and fragile, as though it might slip through her fingers at any second. She had been there nearly 3 weeks. Each morning she woke to Lily's voice outside, calling for Daniel, laughing with the other village children, or humming softly to herself. The sound was both a gift and a torment, a reminder that Lily was alive, thriving, and perhaps no longer hers to claim. One afternoon, Sarah and Daniel sat at the small wooden table outside the cottage, while Lily was off helping mend nets with the fishermen. The ocean breeze was warm, carrying the salty tang of seaweed and the distant cries of gulls. "You'll have to decide soon," Daniel said gently. Sarah stared down at her tea, unable to meet his eyes. "I know. You can't stay here forever," he continued. "And Lily, she deserves to know what her future is going to look like." The words twisted like a knife. Sarah knew he was right, but how could she ask Lily to leave the only world she remembered? This village was her home. Daniel was her anchor. What if she hates me for asking? Sarah whispered. Daniel's gaze softened. "Then at least she'll know you loved her enough to try." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood outside, staring at the moonlit waves, John's letter clenched in her hand. "My love," the words read, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Tell Lily about me. Tell her about the life we dreamed of, the love that made her. And whatever happens, fight for her. Don't let her grow up thinking she was unwanted." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she clutched the letter to her chest. John's voice seemed to echo in the night air. Fight for her. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Sarah found Lily sitting under the palm tree, braiding bits of dried grass together. "Can we talk?" Sarah asked softly. Lily looked up, guarded but curious. "About what?" Sarah sat down in the sand, her knees brushing against Lily's. "About us. About what happens next." Lily's hands stilled on the braid. "I've loved being here with you," Sarah began. "These weeks have been the best of my life. But I can't pretend I don't want more. I want to be your mother again. I want you to come home with me." Lily's face froze. "Home," she repeated, her voice flat. "Yes," Sarah said gently. "To the house where you were born. Your room is still there. I never changed it. It's exactly the way you left it. You'd have friends your age, a school to go to, opportunities." "I have a home," Lily interrupted, her voice sharp. "I have friends here. I have Daniel. Why should I leave everything I know just because you showed up?" Sarah swallowed hard, her chest aching. "Because I'm your mother," she said softly. Lily jumped to her feet, her braid falling forgotten to the sand. "You're a stranger," she cried. "You didn't raise me. Daniel did. You didn't teach me how to swim, or fix nets, or start a fire when it rained. He did." Sarah's throat tightened. "I know, and I will always be grateful to him for that. But Lily, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking for you. You are my daughter, and I want to give you the life your father dreamed you would have." Lily turned away, her shoulders rigid. "What if I don't want that life?" The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah's tears blurred her vision. She stood slowly, her heart pounding. "I don't want to take you from a place where you're happy," she said, her voice breaking. "But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if I should have fought harder to bring you back." Lily didn't answer. She just stood there, staring out at the ocean, her hands balled into fists. Later that evening, Daniel found Sarah sitting alone by the fire pit, her face streaked with tears. "She's angry," Sarah whispered. "What if I've ruined everything?" Daniel crouched beside her, his weathered hand resting on her shoulder. "She's not angry at you. She's scared. This is the first time her whole world has been shaken like this. Give her time." "I don't have much time," Sarah said miserably. "My flight leaves in 3 days." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you want me to talk to her?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Please." The next morning, Sarah woke to find Lily sitting on the porch steps, staring at her feet. "Daniel told me what my father wanted," Lily said quietly. Sarah's breath caught. "He did." Lily nodded. "He said you were supposed to raise me. That this," she gestured to the village, "wasn't the life you and Dad planned." Sarah's throat tightened. "That's true." Lily was quiet for a moment. "But if I leave, Daniel will be alone." Sarah knelt beside her, taking her hands gently. Daniel will never be alone. We'll always stay in touch. He can visit. You can visit here, too. This place is part of who you are now. I would never take that away. Lily looked at her for a long time, her hazel eyes searching. Would I have my own room? She asked suddenly. Sarah laughed through her tears. Yes, the same one you had before, and we can paint it however you like. Purple, green, covered in stars, anything. Lily bit her lip. And do you think Button is still there? Sarah's heart ached. Yes, I kept him safe all these years. He's waiting for you. Something in Lily's face softened. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said finally. I'll go with you, but only if Daniel comes to visit soon. Sarah's tears spilled over as she pulled Lily into her arms, holding her tight. Deal, she whispered, her voice shaking. I promise. That night, as the three of them sat together under the stars, there was still sadness in the air, but also something else. Hope. Sarah knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be new schools, new routines, new challenges. But for the first time in 12 years, she wouldn't be facing them alone. And somewhere, she felt certain John was smiling. The airport was loud, crowded, and nothing like the quiet village Lily had always known. She clutched Sarah's hand tightly as they navigated the security lines, her eyes darting nervously from the flashing signs to the loudspeaker announcements. It's okay, Sarah murmured, squeezing her hand gently. I know it's a lot. Just stay with me. Lily nodded but didn't speak. The truth was, her heart was a storm of conflicting feelings. Sadness at leaving Daniel. Fear of the unknown. A fragile thread of excitement about what waited on the other side of this journey. When the plane finally took off, Lily pressed her face to the window, staring at the receding coastline until it vanished beneath the clouds. Do you want to see a picture of your room? Sarah asked softly, pulling out her phone. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Sarah swiped through her photos until she found one taken just before she left. The small room with its pale yellow walls, the shelves still lined with picture books, the bedspread decorated with stars. You kept it the same, Lily whispered. Of course, Sarah said. It was always yours. Lily looked at the picture for a long time, then handed the phone back. Maybe we can paint it purple, she said quietly. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling. Purple it is. When they landed, Sarah's stomach twisted with nerves. This was it, the moment she had dreamed of for 12 long years. She was bringing her daughter home. The drive from the airport was quiet. Lily stared out the window at the blur of cars, tall buildings, and neon lights. Everything felt too fast, too loud, but when they turned onto Maple Street, the world seemed to slow. This is it, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The house looked almost exactly the same as it had 12 years ago. The white picket fence, the rose bushes Sarah had tended, the swing John had built in the front yard. Lily stared at it, her face unreadable. Do you remember it? Sarah asked softly. Lily shook her head, but her eyes lingered on the swing. Sarah unlocked the door and stepped aside to let Lily go in first. The moment they crossed the threshold, Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. It smelled the same, like wood polish and faint traces of the vanilla candles she used to burn. This is the living room, Sarah said softly. You used to build blanket forts right over there. Lily looked around slowly, her fingers trailing along the edge of the couch. Sarah led her down the hallway and opened the door to her room. Lily stepped inside, staring at the little bed, the tiny bookshelf, the pile of stuffed animals in the corner. Button, Sarah said, her voice breaking as she reached the small, worn rabbit sitting on the pillow. Lily's breath caught. She walked over slowly, her hands trembling as she took the toy. I remember this, she whispered. Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. He's been waiting for you. Lily sat on the bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest. She didn't speak for a long time, just sat there, breathing in the room as though trying to absorb every detail. Finally, she looked up at Sarah. It feels strange, like I belong here and don't at the same time. Sarah sat beside her. That's okay. This house has missed you, too. It's going to take time, but we can make it ours again together. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to keep things gentle. She showed Lily the backyard where John had taught her to ride a bike, the kitchen where they used to make cookies on rainy afternoons. Lily was quiet, taking everything in with wide, thoughtful eyes. The neighborhood kids were curious, too. Some of them had been babies when Lily disappeared. Others had only heard whispers about the tragedy that had haunted the house on Maple Street. Sarah introduced Lily slowly, letting her set the pace. Lily surprised her by joining a group of girls playing basketball at the park one afternoon. She wasn't very good, but she laughed when she missed a hoop, and Sarah's heart leapt at the sound. At night, they sat on the porch swing together. Sarah told Lily stories about John, how he had proposed under a meteor shower, how he used to burn pancakes every Saturday morning, but make them anyway. Did he ever get mad? Lily asked one night. Sarah smiled sadly. Oh, yes. He was stubborn, but he always apologized when he was wrong. He wanted you to know that love meant saying sorry when it mattered. Lily looked down at Button in her lap, her expression thoughtful. I wish I could remember him. Sarah wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Then we'll remember him together. One afternoon, Sarah took Lily to visit John's grave. The headstone was simple, surrounded by blooming wildflowers. Sarah knelt, brushing away a few fallen leaves. This is where I came every week, she said softly. I'd sit here and tell him about my day. I told him about every birthday you missed, every holiday, every Christmas morning. I promised him I'd bring you back someday. Lily knelt beside her, silent. After a long moment, she placed Button carefully at the base of the headstone. Hi, Dad, she whispered. I'm home now. Sarah's tears spilled freely, and for the first time since that terrible day 12 years ago, the grave felt less lonely. That night, Sarah tucked Lily into bed, just as she had 1,000 times before. Do you want me to sing? She asked hesitantly. Lily nodded. Sarah began softly, her voice shaking at first, then growing steadier as a familiar lullaby filled the room. Lily's eyelids drooped, and she clutched Button close. When Sarah finished, Lily reached out sleepily and took her hand. Don't leave, she murmured. I won't, Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. Not ever again. She stayed there until Lily's breathing deepened, then kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Standing in the doorway, Sarah let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time in 12 years, the house felt alive again, not haunted by absence, but filled with possibility. The first few weeks back home were not without struggles. Lily was kind and polite, but sometimes the noise of the city overwhelmed her. When cars honked or sirens blared, she would cover her ears and flinch. Crowded grocery stores made her cling to Sarah's arm. At night, Sarah sometimes heard her crying softly into her pillow. Do you want to talk about it? Sarah would ask gently, sitting at the edge of the bed. Lily would shake her head. I just miss him, she whispered one night. Sarah nodded, understanding. It's okay to miss him. Daniel saved you. He loved you. You'll always carry him with you. The next day, Sarah helped Lily write a letter to Daniel. They mailed it overseas, addressed to his small coastal home. Lily drew a picture of the two of them fishing, and Sarah promised they'd visit one day. It became a ritual. Once a month, Lily wrote to Daniel. She didn't always send the letters, but writing them helped her feel close to the man who had kept her safe when the world had turned upside down. School was another adjustment. Sarah met with the principal before enrolling Lily, explaining her unusual background. The staff were understanding, but Sarah still worried about how the other kids would treat her. On Lily's first day, Sarah walked her to the gate, holding her hand the whole way. You've got this, Sarah said, kneeling to look her in the eye. Be brave. Just one step at a time. Lily nodded, clutching her backpack strap. That afternoon, Sarah waited anxiously outside. When Lily finally came out, her expression was unreadable. Well, Sarah asked carefully. Lily shrugged. It was weird, she admitted. But one girl asked me to sit with her at lunch. Sarah smiled. That's a good start. By the end of the month, Lily had made 3 friends. They came over after school, filling the house with the kind of noise Sarah had once thought she'd never hear again. Giggles, footsteps running up and down the hallway, doors slamming. It was chaotic, but it was the sweetest kind of chaos. Sarah also faced her own challenges. For 12 years, her entire identity had been wrapped up in waiting and searching. Now that Lily was home, she had to rediscover who she was outside of that role. She began seeing a therapist, something she had resisted for years. "You've been living in survival mode," her therapist said during one session. "It's okay to learn how to live again." Sarah started small. She joined a book club at the library, went for walks along the bay, even signed up for a pottery class. She wanted to show Lily that life could be more than loss. That joy was worth finding again. Some evenings, she caught herself sitting on the porch swing long after Lily had gone to bed, watching the stars. "I kept the light on for 12 years, she whispered one night. "Now she's here. It's time to let the light mean something new." One day, Sarah found Lily sitting cross-legged in her room, surrounded by papers. "What are you working on?" Sarah asked. Lily looked up, her face bright. "I'm writing down all the stories you told me about Dad. I don't want to forget them." Sarah's heart swelled. "Would you like to hear one you haven't heard before?" Lily nodded eagerly, and Sarah told her about the time John had built a tree house in the backyard, hammering away in the summer heat until it was perfect. "Maybe we could fix it up together," Lily said when she finished. And so that weekend, they did. They painted the old wood, replaced the broken steps, and hung wind chimes from the branches. When they were done, Lily climbed inside, sitting in the doorway with her legs dangling. "It's like he's still here," she said softly. Sarah climbed up beside her and nodded. "In a way, he always will be." Months passed. Lily grew more confident, more at ease. She started riding a bike again, laughing when she wobbled but refusing to give up. She joined an art club at school, bringing home drawings of boats, oceans, and sunsets. One night, she showed Sarah a picture she had painted. A small boat under a starry sky, a lighthouse in the distance. "That's how I felt when Daniel found me," she explained. "Like the lighthouse was you and it led him to me." Sarah hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "You're my light too, Lily." The anniversary of John's disappearance came around again, but this year felt different. Instead of just Sarah lighting a candle, she and Lily stood side by side in the yard. Together, they lit a lantern and let it drift into the sky. "To Dad," Lily said softly. "To Dad," Sarah echoed, watching until the light disappeared into the night. Later that evening, Sarah found herself sitting at the kitchen table, writing a letter, not to the Coast Guard or to a private investigator, but to John. She wrote about Lily's laugh, about the way she was learning to play guitar, about the treehouse they had rebuilt. She told him she still missed him every day, but that their daughter was going to be okay. When she finished, she tucked the letter into Lily's memory box, the one she had kept all those years, and closed it gently. For the first time, she felt at peace. Months turned into a full year. On the first anniversary of Lily's return, Sarah threw a small celebration. Just a few neighbors, Lily's friends, and Sarah's sister. They ate cake in the backyard, hung fairy lights from the trees, and played music until the stars came out. Lily stood up at one point, her face glowing in the warm light. "I used to think home was a place," she said shyly, "but now I know it's a person. It's you, Mom. Thank you for never giving up on me." Sarah's heart felt like it might burst. When the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, Sarah and Lily curled up together on the porch swing. "This is it," Sarah whispered. "What is?" Lily asked. "Our new beginning," Sarah said. "And I think your dad would be so proud of us." Lily rested her head on Sarah's shoulder, and together they watched the stars, the same stars that had once guided John and Lily on that fateful trip so many years ago. But tonight, they were not a reminder of what was lost. They were a promise of everything still to come. This final section ties everything together. Healing, growth, connection, and hope. It shows that while the pain of the past will always be part of them, Sarah and Lily have chosen to build a future filled with light.